Welcome, everyone. Our guest here today is Sherwin Gandhi, co-founder and president of Jeeves, a corporate card for global startups that launched in 2019. It's pretty remarkable. Now they serve over 1,000 customers in 20 plus countries across North America, Latin America, and Europe after just a little over a year since launch. So pretty remarkable growth. And they've raised from really great investors like Y Combinator, Andreessen Horowitz, and CRV. So with that in mind, I just want to say, Sherwin, welcome to the program.
Rex, thanks for having me. Really excited to be speaking to the Cambrian audience.
Awesome. Well, first, just start me off. So I know I said, Jeeves is a corporate card for global startups, but walk me in a little bit more detail what exactly it is Jeeves does.
Yeah, I'll start with a quick description and then we can get into some stories about how customers have benefited from the platform. So what we're building at Jeeves is a borderless business bank. And typically customers care about one of three things: deposits, payments, and lending. And what we found is that banking is a bit fragmented all over the world. So if you sign up with one bank account in one country, in the same bank in a different country, you might end up with two different logins and then two different processes to apply for cards and loans. And so we bring all that together into one platform. So we're live in more than 24 countries at this point. And when a customer signs up with us in one country, they can get access to all these products I mentioned, see it in one place, and the transactions end up in one place, which means it can be synced up with their accounting software, and they can track what's going on a month-to-month basis and really track their cash flow.
It's really cool. And I think Jeeves definitely touches on one of the kind of very interesting and exciting trends, both in fintech, but just in startups generally, around building international native businesses from day one. But if it's hard to launch a company in just one country, you can imagine how hard it is to build and scale operations across a lot of countries. Like the idea of logging into 10 different bank accounts for 20 different employees and trying to reconcile all of that, let alone get access to like the debt associated with it, is just a total nightmare.
It is.
Before we kind of get more into like where Jeeves is today and what all you're working on, and we can actually cover some of the exciting product roadmap developments. You guys just released a new product today. Would love to just dial back and hear the story of what was the inspiration and journey that eventually led you down this path of building Jeeves.
Yeah, it's a great question, and the pain point that we're solving is something I experienced myself at a startup that I actually started this startup early on in the life cycle, and eventually it grew to over $1 billion valuation. It was a global based startup. So we had offices in dozens of countries, a multi-currency balance sheet, and unfortunately checking accounts in 3 different places. So every month we try and close the books, and it took 40 plus days to close the books, which means we never really did. So that was like finding bank accounts from 3 different countries, different currencies, reconciling employees, putting expenses in, and then also us paying bills. And it was really difficult to do this on a month-to-month basis. That actually made it hard to raise capital and figure out where the money was going. So it was during this time that I started to think, there's a lot of fintech innovation happening here in the United States. And this is, I'm talking about 2017, 2018, but there isn't much happening outside of the US, let alone from a global perspective. So what we did or what we were doing was incredibly difficult just because banking services weren't really available on a global scale. At the time, I was thinking about, how do credit cards and payment integrations really work cross-border? And then I thought one step further, which is, folks need to make payments, but they also need to make deposits and borrow money. And so earlier in my career, I started off at JP Morgan as a bond trader, and I issued more than $17 billion of loans all around the world. It just let me understand how debt capital markets were available to the larger companies, because these were like Fortune thousands that we were working with. But the startups, the SMBs of the world, they were underserved from a capital markets perspective. So in 2019,
I think that's a really important insight, and something we see across a lot of stack in fintech is SMB is where there are a ton of problems of lack of access to like good payment, to good debt, to good, just SaaS software. but there's this huge problem of distribution, especially when you're trying to connect them through to capital markets. And with the rise of software, you're actually able to do that in scale. You see why in the international context of someone like Jeeves, it's like that problem of distribution and access connecting capital markets into all these countries is a huge. So yeah, that capital markets insight is definitely like a very important piece of understanding what you guys have built.
It's fascinating. And I think folks on Wall Street understand that there's a ton of opportunity to lend around the world, but to your point, the distribution mechanism doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And one investor that I know very well said one day that software is going to eat the world. You may know them as Andreessen Horowitz. So, and I agree with that, right? And so what's happening is that capital is now being distributed through software, whereas 10, 15 years ago, it was distributed directly with the customer bank relationship. And so fintechs really are sort of permeating all parts of commerce, I think, globally, and helping bridge the gap between capital and software. But we're in the earliest stages. The company was founded in February of 2019, and I spent a couple of months thinking about this problem and finally quit my job to focus on it full time, which was very hard to do because we had at that point about a 2.5-year-old and an 8-month-old, I believe. And here I was quitting my job. But the problem was
you're welcome to introduce them to the community here if you'd like.
They're listening
like right outside.
They're watching live right now. My son might walk in soon. But that's what prompted the inspiration behind the company was really this pain point that I'd experienced. And along with the fact that there was a clear pathway to funding the company, to your point, Rex, from a debt capital markets perspective, right? Speaking to Wall Street, and then also understanding how to go about building this business and get funding, external funding, right? Institutional capital in the Silicon Valley space. So
yeah,
just spent a year ideating, talking to customers, learning about payments. And, that is what really prompted kind of the initial ideas about how we could launch the business as the wedge being a cards product.
Talk to me too about building out the kind of initial version of the product, what that took, what it looked like, and how you were able to like incorporate customer and investor feedback, because you had these kind of original insights from your time in debt capital markets. But there's obviously a lot more than just that to building the business.
It absolutely, it's hard to do. One of the initial things I did was I was probably like 2 years ahead, but I was looking at these securitization documents about how do credit card companies actually like fund themselves, right? With lending, compliance and regulatory was incredibly important. And so one of the first things to do was actually talk to lawyers who were, who kind of
the most exciting part of any fintech founder's journey is early on, you ask, who knows a good attorney who knows things about this somewhat esoteric space?
Yeah, that's exactly right. That exercise was challenging and fun to figure out how to navigate regs and compliance. Then there was the actual MVP building, actually building out the product that someone could use. Back in 2019, there weren't as many sort of card issuing as a service companies. And so,
and even today, there are more in the US, but in the international context, it's a very difficult problem still.
It's it still is. It still is because the APIs are available, but you'll find that MasterCard and Visa, when they send an authorization through, there could be 20 different edge cases. And that actually took a long time. So, just swiping a card, getting the commercial contract signed, swiping a card, when you're actually working with card issuers, a lot of the questions they have are actually around what are your volumes going to be? So as a founder, you're like, well, we're going to get there. Here's what I think it's going to look like. And so you're actually pitching, the earlier stages, you're just pitching to everyone you work with, whether it's another fintech, card issuer, a lawyer, whatever it is, right? So that's a lot of what happened early on. Took about a year before there was a working product. And that's when we started reaching out to...
Did you try and launch in like just one country or two countries to test the like multi-country from day one?
Yeah, we tried it in a few different countries. So Mexico was one of the countries. A few places so the UK and then Canada, we also tested. This was an incredibly powerful exercise and really, really helped because Canadian customers told us, hey, I'm with one of the big four banks here, and I can get a checking account, but I'm having trouble getting a credit card.
Yep.
Like I have $100,000 in the bank and I can't get a card. So that
Yep.
was a good insight. Right. In Mexico, we learned like Mexico is an interesting exercise because those folks said, look, credit cards are great. I kind of had trouble getting one, but most of the payments are actually made through a local payment method. Like vendors don't accept credit cards. So, right, that was a unique insight. And then
Yeah.
Europe, there were some similar flavors of feedback to Canada, and so that's when we realized, the thing is, if you have money and you need to spend it, you could use a credit card, or you could use local payment, or you could use a cross-border payment. And oftentimes that could be three different providers by country. And
Yep.
if you're in two different countries, that's six potential providers. And that's when the insight came of, hey, this needs to be an infrastructure company,
Hmm.
right? Let's build to all the payment rails, local, cross-border cards, and then attach that to some type of a line of credit or a deposits product, and just let folks spend money the way they want to in one platform.
I
I
think for
think
all the
that's
other
the
like
concept.
fintech founders in the room right now who've tried to build things in the US context and they're like, oh my God, that was so hard to do just in the US. They're probably all having like a heart attack thinking about what that would look like to do it in Canada and in Mexico. Great, like in 22 dozen countries. Like it's kind of a terrifying prospect.
It
But
is. It was
equally defensible and
exhilarating.
incredibly valuable.
It's incredibly valuable. Right? The first API call, I made to the counterpart that was issuing our card was incredibly exciting, just to get like a response. And
Hmm.
then the first card transaction was purchasing baby oatmeal for my son, and it was really cool to like use the card online and then see it pop up.
It's the little things when you know how much is going on in the back end to make that happen. That's great.
Yeah,
That's a great
exactly,
story. Um,
exactly.
well,
The,
that's
the
really cool. So that's kind of the insight behind the MVP is, start with a couple countries, build up a lot of stuff, get all the way to the point where you can issue swipe a card, buy oatmeal for your son. Talk to me about getting your kind of first set of customers and what your journey has looked like over time in terms of kind of the shape and types of customers you've served. Presumably, they're not all buying oatmeal for their children. Probably
they're
doing a little bit more than that.
they're not. These are supposed to be bona fide business expenses. Yeah, we got our first set of customers during Y Combinator. So we were in the summer 20 batch at Y
Hmm.
Combinator, and this was the batch right after a lot of the impact from COVID was felt around the world. So 35% roughly of our batch were non-US based founders.
And the first
Um,
fully remote batch as well, right? I
And it was
assume,
the
like,
first
yeah.
fully remote batch. That's right. We had folks in different countries who they actually just needed the product, right? And then they were also able to give us feedback as founders as to how it was really working for them. And so the first batch of customers came from Y Combinator. And over time, we started to add other folks like small to medium sized businesses. So, a lot of our customers are VC backed, a lot of them are privately
Yep.
held, and that's sort of how it grew over time. Is I think word of mouth started spreading in these different regions that we were live in, that there was a new credit product that was actually very helpful for early stage founders and medium sized businesses.
Yeah, and it sounds like a lot of the growth has been word of mouth because, as you said to me, in some ways, it's a product that sells yourself. If you can't get a card and you're a Canadian company, like you want a nice seamless platform to do that. But you've also done something like I saw the posts of you putting up adverts, I think, on the Tube in London and some other stuff. So I'm maybe curious to hear about some of the other initiatives you've undertaken recently as you're expanding the customer base.
Yeah, recently, so a lot of it was word of mouth. We started testing some aspects of social. I think we launched an Instagram campaign and Facebook campaign earlier this year, and that actually helped quite a bit because based on the copy that you put out there,
Hmm.
there's a lot you can learn about what resonates and what doesn't, and those are pieces of information that actually can go into the product development cycle, which is incredibly helpful. The adverts that we're seeing on the tube and in airports, those are general awareness sort of campaigns, And the reception has actually been really nice because we're starting to see, sort of outside of the box, we've been thinking in terms of customer acquisition, who is actually interested in this.
Cool. So we've talked kind of MVP, we've talked through customers, what those have looked like. Another big question that a lot of early stage or even later stage fintech companies face is, what does my product roadmap need to look like? Like, what should be the next thing that I build and release? Do I need to build and release anything? How do I think about incorporating customer feedback? What's the kind of build, measure, learn, like release cycle look like? So you guys just announced one of your first new products, which would be the revenue-based financing. So maybe talk to me a little bit about that, and then how you think about kind of the product roadmap and just your product development process generally at Jeeves.
Yeah, for sure. So this particular product is very exciting because there are large parts of the world that are underserved from just a capital perspective, whether it's equity or debt, right? So recently we've seen a trend of venture capital flowing into LATAM, India, parts of Africa, Canada.
Yep.
Debt is following, but it's early stages, right? So a lot of the loan products that exist, they're in the United States. And if you go back a couple of decades, they started to proliferate outside of this country.
Mm-hmm.
And now what we're seeing is, and the point we were talking about earlier, is software helping distribute the loan product. So entrepreneurs today, they're tasked with coming up with a vision, building the MVP, and raising capital.
Yep.
Raising capital means giving up ownership traditionally, right? There's a trade for equity and control and economics. So what we're looking to do, and we found a lot of folks that have benefited from this, like the story I mentioned earlier, is bringing debt earlier on in the cycle.
Yep.
We found a way to actually do that. And it actually helps entrepreneurs keep more ownership of their company and also help them finance the growth at a cheaper price. And then gets them to the next stage of, their fundraising cycle and helps them build product faster. So the product we launched today is helping entrepreneurs do that. And we're distributing this product in the countries that I mentioned. So Canada, Europe, the UK, parts of LATAM, which is incredibly exciting because a lot of these places are underfunded. And we're
Yep.
really excited to be right alongside the entrepreneur and helping them at the earliest stages.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because one of the core competencies that Jeeves offers is just connectivity into the capital markets, and then all of the complex infrastructure to take, a dollar from a hedge fund or other sort of institutional investor in New York, and then basically match it up with an SMB's balance sheet based off of their revenue in one of 20 countries. And there's like a clear need, a zero interest rate world of the investor, and a clear need on the SMB side. And
Yeah.
now that you already have your kind of initial platform, it's really exciting to see what kind of other products you'll be able to pipe through there. But very exciting. Would love to talk. I think this is a great jumping off point. What is, Jeeves's long-term vision?
I do think that banking in 5 to 10 years looks like what we're building at Jeeves. And so the vision here is to build a global borderless business banking product, right? So if you're operating in different countries as an entrepreneur or an operator, you can work with Jeeves and get all of the payment options you need, the deposits products and the lending products in one place. And we want to be a partner to growing your business. So I don't know if credit cards are around in a decade, but whatever the form of payment is, we want to be providing that form of payment. We want to use all the data that's available now for underwriting in these different countries to provide amazing lending products and also build an amazing deposits product. So again, I think if a lot of businesses around the world are using Jeeves, in a couple of years, and we're helping these businesses grow, helping the entrepreneurs and the teams, thrive economically and also help, create jobs, that would be a win for us.
Yeah. Well, there you have it. Jeeves is building the global borderless business bank. Awesome. Just want to conclude with a question we ask all of our guests, which is, what advice would you offer for prospective founders, folks who are thinking about striking out on their own?
That's a great question. I would say have a lot of conversations. I think having an idea and staying focused is just as important as speaking with a lot of folks and just getting feedback. That process when you translate it into building an MVP and then talking to your users and just getting constant feedback, it's incredibly powerful. The other thing I would say is that if you're focused on a particular vertical or an industry, consider perhaps not just staying in that vertical or industry, because the product you have or the idea you have might actually translate really well in another application in another industry.
Well, I think that's pretty much all we have time for. Sherwin, it's been really awesome having you on the program. Thanks so much for joining us.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Rex, again, thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun. Much appreciated.
All right, awesome. Well, maybe we'll have to do another event in another year or two and check back in and see where else you're live, what other products you've launched, and how far you've come on the vision towards building the global borderless business bank.
I would love to do that, Rex.
Awesome.
Have a great evening.
Well, everyone, mark your calendars. September 2023, we'll call it.
Done.
All right, cool.
See you
Cheers.
later.
Take care, everyone. Have a good one.
Take care. Bye.